And another commander ran in and said, Chief, are you listening to the radio? And I wasn't. I had it on, but I wasn't. Neither of us were paying attention. And he said, there's an active shooter. I don't know how to describe that moment, because I think I looked at him and said, what did you just say? As if his words didn't compute for me. And then he said it again. And now I turned my radio up, and then we just started running, just tripping over each other. And we got in the car. And as I'm in the car, Commander Keith Cross is driving, who is now the chief, and myself and Commander Fichtel. And all I heard was, Officer Marco Gomez, I'm shot. We don't know where the shooter is. He's shooting. We're trying to locate him. And then I hear Officer Sobolski shot. And I'm thinking, everything starts to play in slow motion. It only took us 3.5 minutes to get to the scene, but it felt like it took 2 hours. And then as I was having this moment of, this is not happening, this is not actually happening, then I don't know what it was, but it was like a switch flipped. And it was, all right, we're going in. What do we do?
Do not be alarmed. It's just a couple of guys. Who are these guys? Ray Regina, beloved former mayor of St. Charles, lifetime educator. And Pat Crimmins, a Geneva lawyer, but he's actually okay. From Elgin to Aurora, from Naperville to Elburn, these guys are gonna talk everything. So, here's Pat and Ray.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Just a Couple of Guys with your host, Pat Crimmins, and yours truly, Ray Regina, where, as the saying goes, we talk everything. We are pleased to be in studio today, and we'll be joined by former Aurora Police Chief Kristen Ziman, author of a new book, Reimagining Blue. Kristen will join us later, and when we return, Pat and I will have a few nuggets and tidbits to discuss. Stay tuned.
Billy and Lauren here with the Diamond Air in St. Charles.
Gentlemen, does this conversation sound familiar?
Happy anniversary, darling.
A new juicer? This sucks.
Ouch. But hey, don't feel bad, fellas. Even I've made this same mistake.
No, Billy, your gift was worse. A plastic clothes hamper.
Will I never live that one down?
There's still time, Billy.
Well, thoughtful gifts such as natural diamond earrings is a heck of a lot easier than sleeping on the couch. And hey, unlike most everything else in this brave new world we live in, at the Diamond Air, we hand make our fine diamond jewelry here in the United States. So our prices have remained consistent and competitive.
And luckily for all you expecting daddies out there, we now offer interest-free financing for push gifts as well.
In that case, babe, I think I can make up for that hamper. Picture this, Lauren. You in a diamond tennis necklace and nothing at all.
Keep dreaming, Rambo.
I will. And at the Diamond Air, you will get a larger, better quality diamond for less. Because remember, gentlemen, size does matter.
Okay, just a couple of guys. We have a variety of things we wanted to talk about. The first thing, Ray, I guess, is some kind of a shout out to the local high schools, both Batavia and St. Charles North.
Well, the St. Charles ladies, St. Charles North ladies, won the state.
Let me stop you right there. I've been fighting this for my entire life. We don't like when we call them the Lady Saints or the Lady North Stars. So what you meant to say was just the St. Charles North girls softball team.
That's fine. And the fact of the matter is they brought home a state championship to St. Charles, and we certainly want to recognize them for hard work and efforts and their athletic prowess. So I saw that they were recognized by the city council. Mayor Vitek recognized them. And
I've had a few teams and chambers being recognized, and it's a wonderful honor.
It is. And then, of course, down in Batavia, the Bulldogs, track Bulldogs, won the state championship. And a shout out to them. I have an affinity for track because I always finished last in track in high school, but I parlayed that into a marathon career. So I'm always prone to appreciate the efforts of a track team. And so they did a fine job down in Charleston, and we tip our hats to them as well.
I don't know anything about track, really, and I don't know how you calculate the points to determine who's state champ and who's not. The Crimmonses, as you may know, are genetically flawed so that we can't run very fast.
But Pat, you could have been good in the discus.
Or
the shot put.
Well, my daughter was a few inches away from being all state in shot put.
Is that right?
And it was like a hobby for her. She just kind of.
You said your daughter was this Bailey or Nora?
Bailey,
okay.
Of course, yeah. So it was just a hobby. She didn't work at it at all. I think it was part of a vast plan to avoid PE class. So if you were in a sport, you didn't have to go.
I think I should bring Bailey on this show to give her equal time. You brought her name up a couple times here. We always ought to give her equal time.
Yeah, so
Bailey, if you're listening, just call me and we give you equal time.
She has helped make the Crimmins a track family, as it were. So again, congratulations to both St. Charles North and Batavia. And it's great news, and we're very happy for you. So we wanted to talk a little bit about you got a vacation coming up.
I do.
I don't know if it'll affect the podcast. There won't be a hiatus, as far as I know, unless the union calls.
Well, the podcast would seem to be a new post every Friday, as we've been doing in the past. Note to Paul on that one.
Yeah.
And I would just simply say that Diane and I are going to go to a place we've gone to New England numerous times, and when we go to New England, we try to get to Boston. We will do that. But I'm excited about our trip to Cape Cod, which we have never been to, other than just a trek south and into Hyannisport, but then back up to Boston. And so this time we're going to go out in the Cape all the way to Provincetown. But I will point out.
What is a Cape, by the way?
Pardon me?
You got your islands, you got your estuaries.
Isthmus.
You got your isthmus. What is a Cape?
A Cape. You're putting me on the spot.
I've heard of Cape Fear.
Yes, it's an attachment to the mainland, and it jets out into the water.
It's like a protuberance.
Well, that's one way of putting it.
Yeah, so it's a mass of land that kind of.
If you look at the Cape Cod, you look at an arm that's been placed out there into the water.
I see.
With a very narrow expanse as you move from Hyannis out to Provincetown, with small beach towns along the way.
Would Manhattan be a cape?
No.
Well,
Manhattan is an island.
It is an island. Well, it's not surrounded by water, is it?
Well, yes.
It is?
Look at it's Manhattan Island. You got the East River and the Hudson River, and then
they've got the bridges. The bridges.
You got Brooklyn Bridge, Manhattan Bridge, Verrazano Narrows Bridge. I go on and on here. Frog's Neck Bridge. In fact, Feelin' Groovy, the song by Simon and Garfunkel, the 59th Street Bridge.
That would be a good concert to see at Ravinia. Simon and Garfunkel.
That would be.
Now,
anyway, back to the
Cape. What are you doing there?
Well, I know one day we're going to take a 45-minute boat ride to Martha's Vineyard, which is an island out there.
Will Obama be out there at this time?
Well, he does have property out there. That's an interesting question, whether he'll be out there or not. But I'm sure that if he is out there, it'll be well disguised and well protected. But the other island of note out there in the harbor, not in the harbor, in the ocean, is Nantucket. That's a 2-hour ride from the mainland. And Diane, I thought, well, that's 4 hours out and back. And although everybody raves about Nantucket, in fact, this morning I'm reading the Wall Street Journal, Pat, and I find out that on the island, the debate ensued. I thought about this as it relates to city council, let's say in St. Charles, that I dealt with for 8 years. I thought to myself, how would they react? The council was debating the issue of whether or not they were going to allow a topless beach or beaches on Nantucket. And the vote was in favor of allowing it. It has to be approved by the Massachusetts Attorney General. And so there's more on that probably as we go along.
Let me guess here. Give me the gender breakdown of the Nantucket City Council.
Oh, I didn't. I didn't dig into the topic that deeply to know that.
All I know about Nantucket is it's famous for the Irish limerick. It's used often in the Irish limerick.
Well, yeah, as an Irishman, you would know that very well.
Now, I also know a little bit about nude beaches.
Now, remember, this was distinct. You're talking about nude beaches, but this is topless.
Okay, so
and it's a gender issue, actually. Guys are topless.
Sure.
Okay, so you get the point, and that was the discussion in Nantucket. But carry on.
I
with your
see what
story.
you're saying. So, in order to be fair and equal,
I think that's the essence of the argument.
If the men get to be
right,
bare-chested, why don't the women?
All right, but now to your story.
What's the constituency there? The women are complaining, or the men?
I'm gonna have to go back and reread the article. I just saw it.
I can't imagine a clamor of women saying, "We want the right to bare our chest."
Well, you'll have to read the article yourself, and after we're done here, you can call it up here on your computer. But how about your story?
The nude beaches, yeah. Back in the day, before I had obligations and had a little money in my pocket, I would travel to Bahamas and Jamaica and such. And
how about Aruba?
No, I never went to Aruba.
Aruba, Jamaica.
Yeah. I almost died in a few of these trips, but we can get to near-death experiences. Maybe that'll be a segment. But
I like that idea.
Yeah, because I've had several.
Really?
Oh, more than 10.
Near-death experiences. Note to self, near-death experiences, future segment. Go ahead.
Segment. But so I'm at this place called Hedonism, which you can imagine is
Is that like Rose Lawn down in Indiana?
I don't ever want to have Indiana and hedonism in the same conversation.
But you do. They did have down near Rensselaer where the Bears trained. They had nudist colony down there.
Oh, I don't know anything about that.
All right, go ahead.
But my point was that so there's this nudity all over the resort. And most of it is just, if I may, just...
The resort's called Hedonism?
Hedonism.
All right.
And there's a Hedonism 2 now. I have no idea what that could be. But these nude people would just walk around nude. And I remember getting there. The first thing that we did was we went to eat. And I'm eating, and this guy's buttock is in close to my table as I'm eating. And I'm getting...
The servers weren't nude, were they?
No, just...
And you weren't nude then?
No, of course not. Let's be honest here, Ray. At no point in time have I been nude in public. All right.
Just so we can note to self that Pat was never...
So I found the nudity to be offensive. Most were obese white people that should never be nude.
Well, Pat, but if I may ask you, you're a lawyer.
Sure.
You going to the hedonism, wasn't that an assumption of risk on your part?
You know what? I don't know that they talked about. I think there was some talk about nudity, but it was supposed to be separate. Like the nude people had there was even a nude beach.
Right.
Nude beach, and then they called it a prude beach over here. I, of course, was the prude guy. But did I not walk through the nude beach just to,
you did.
Stretch my legs, as they say?
Didn't you?
Yeah.
All right.
And I was not in any way excited about what I saw.
All right. Well, that's interesting. So Nantucket and the Irish limerick has something to consider here if they move forward with this movement at this point. And I'm looking forward to maybe a further report on that.
All eyes are on Nantucket.
That's right. I plan to enjoy myself, though, in New England, as I always do, with some oysters and clams and mussels.
Well, as you know,
and, of course, a lobster roll.
We used to go to Maine, and lobster was everywhere. I think it was even at McDonald's.
The best lobster the best lobster roll in America. I say that unequivocally. And I've got people here in St. Charles who I've seen on Facebook would agree with me. You know who you are out there. I've said Reds I'm going to probably mispronounce the name right now, but it'll come back. Wisconsin, Maine. It's hour and a half wait, and people do it gloriously and talk to their friends while they're waiting to pay $20 for a lobster roll. That I have to admit is out of this world.
Well, let's be honest here, if I may. Lobster roll, we're going to have a segment called recipes.
Yes, we are.
Cooking. But a lobster roll consists of bread, lobster, and mayonnaise, right? I mean, where's
butter?
Where's the genius here?
There's not a lot of genius. But I want to tell you, the right lobster roll is to die for.
Okay. I don't know about you, but I've never found any variants of lobster. This Maine lobster is much better than this South Carolina lobster. I've never. So, anyways, you got the lobster, you got the butter, you got the mayo, and the bread.
One quick lobster story, and then we're gonna call it a day. My wife and I are in Cape Elizabeth, Maine.
Oh yeah.
And we're at the Lobster Pound. I think that was the name of the restaurant, Lobster Pound. And glorious day. You go out and order a big lobster, a full lobster. Each one of us got a lobster. The cost was minimal compared to what you pay for here. A couple of beers. It was glorious. I'm sitting there nibbling my lobster, and I look over to the right, and here's this family and this young child is sitting there. And of course, he's not interested in lobster, so they've got a hot dog for him there. He's got sitting there, and the hot dog is sitting right there on the plate. And what we also see is the fact that we've got a lot of seagulls flying around. And there's a lot of notices about the seagulls. Don't feed them, don't do this. And I kind of had my eye on this one seagull, and he comes all of a sudden as swooping in. Next thing you know, he picked that bun clean.
Really?
He picked it clean. The bun sat there. The dog is gone. The kid is wailing.
Wow.
He's wailing. He's been assaulted by a seagull. And I felt bad for him. I'm not sure whether his parents bought him another dog or not, but I do know that the gull was happy.
When I lived in Michigan, Ray, as you recall, I've lived in many different jurisdictions.
Yes, you are a well-traveled individual.
We used to go out for ice cream, and there was a time when we were attacked by bats. And the bats would come down and eat the ice cream, dive into the ice cream. And to this day, I have no idea what that was all about.
Well,
but when it comes to animals, you got to keep your distance.
Well, since this is a travel segment, let me mention something about bats, and that would be in Austin, Texas.
Oh, sure.
You've heard that story, that down in the summertime, so like right now, for example, if you went to Austin, you could go down on the Colorado River, which runs through the city. And you could go down, and there's several hotels along there, and it's like a fiesta at night. Everybody's lined up, they're drinking and so on, knowing that the sun's going to set. And when that sun sets, get ready for the number. On that bridge going across the Colorado River, you start hearing squeaking as the sun is going. It's almost like out of a vampire movie. The sun is setting, squeaking,
it's not couples in their lawn chairs.
No. 1 million Mexican bats go flying into the night like a parade. There's signs on the side that says, "Do not treat a fallen bat." It's unreal. It's unreal. 1 million. There's no mosquito problems in Austin.
So that sign was like for local veterans or veterinarians, I mean?
And veterans.
How do we know these are Mexican bats?
I'm reading what was said in the Austin travel guide. They put your room.
So they come from Mexico, or these are specific?
They might. I don't know where they come from, but I know they migrate to that bridge in the summertime. That bridge is a haven for Mexican bats.
Have they studied why?
See, and now you're asking a question that you don't know the answer to, nor do I. And so we're not going to go.
I'm going to give you one seafood story before we leave, and then we can wrap it up. But I used to live in California, Ray.
The Bay Area, San Ramon.
Well, I lived in a couple spots in California, but Walnut Creek is. But
I had a reservation at a steakhouse one time at Walnut Creek.
Yes, and we heard about that. But anyways, that's where I developed my affinity for seafood. Shark fin soup before it was illegal. And you haven't lived until you had shark fin soup. It's really good. But anyway, so one night we go out and I have crab legs.
Oh, none of that.
And, as you know, these things are huge. What am I, 6, 7 years old? These things are huge, and I'm attacking it. And the thing about lobster and crab legs... You
didn't use the clippers. You just said no.
No clippers. They're in Los Angeles. But my point, it's very difficult to get the food out of these shells. Right? Even a lobster, unless it's deshelled, it's
you got to pick at it. You got a small fork.
You're burning more calories trying to eat than you are consuming the food. So anyways, it's show and tell, third grade at whatever school this was. And so I talked to the table, my mom and dad, and I said, I'm going to take these crab legs, these shells, to show and tell. So the theory was that it was going to be Friday, and I would go on show and tell and show everybody the crab legs and tell them the story of the restaurant. We had umbrellas and our drinks, etc. Ray's now looking at his watch. Note to self. Anyways, so I don't go on show and tell on Friday. So I stick my shells in my desk.
I knew this was going there.
Yeah. And so we come back Monday.
Yeah, fumigate the place.
The smell was ungodly. And it was all my fault. And so we had class outside, which in California you can do.
Class outside.
Class outside. Our lockers were outside.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's nice. Nice feature.
I think we have to expand this segment from on the town to on the country and beyond.
And beyond. But so, yeah, that's kids, if you're going to do a show and tell, try not to use food product that might spoil over the weekend.
And with that, we'll take a break and perhaps we'll be right back.
Perhaps.
At St. Charles Chrysler Jeep Ram, the brand new Grand Wagoneer and the Grand Cherokee L with the third row is now in stock. And right now, during our Jeep Celebration Month, pick a Grand Cherokee L with a third row for just $399 a month, or a Wagoneer for $719 a month, because the real deal is right here on Main Street in St. Charles. Or go to stcharlescdj.com. That's stcharlescdj.com.
We're back, and we're here with Chief Kristen Ziman from the city of Aurora and places beyond. She wrote a book, and it's called Reimagining Blue. And right now that's published by Amplify Publishing, and I think that's where you can get the book. There are other places we can get the book?
Yeah, you can pre-order it on Amazon. It actually drops on July 12th. And on Amazon, there's the Audible and the Kindle version, and that's all available for pre-order right now.
All right. This is something I like to do when people come on and talk about books. Explain the title for us.
So at the time I was writing it, well, first of all, I started this book in 2018. So this book has been truly, it's a culmination of my years as a police officer. But when I finished the book, it was really in the middle of the divisiveness and defund the police, abolish the police, ACAB. And so I sought to kind of bridge the gap. And what would it look like, law enforcement, if we reimagined what law enforcement would look like? And as I say in the book, it's not broken. People say it's broken, but can it be better? Does it need reform? Absolutely. And so that's what it's about, is reimagining what law enforcement could be when we are at our best.
And the photograph is of you half in a police uniform and half in a dress uniform. Yeah. Explain that to us.
Yeah, it's a half me in a civilian clothes, and it truly is. It's a metaphor for the transition. I've been in law enforcement for 30 years, and this is the first time in my life where I'm not in uniform. So it's this transition into this quote afterlife, into civilian clothes.
Well, it was a wonderful book, and I enjoyed it. I was surprised a little bit about some of the personal stories you shared, but I think it was certainly appropriate given everything that's going on in the country. I wanted to read, actually, from the very end of it, if I may, and have you comment on this quote. Whether we are pro-life or pro-choice, pro-police or anti-police, black or white, we are all living and breathing humans that deserve to move about the world in our own way. As long as we aren't harming one another, we should be free to pray to the God we choose or love the person we love. Above all, not one of us should ever believe that we are better than another. Inequity is born from the belief of feeling superior to another, and we are all just trying to climb our own mountains. You are alive at an absolutely critical moment in time. Show up for this life, find your purpose, but don't stop there, because that only serves you. Your true calling is determining your gift and then using it to serve the world. What does that mean in terms of your life, in terms of policing today, and what's going on in the country?
Well, Pat, you cut right to the end of the book and ruined the ending for everyone. That's a spoiler alert.
I don't know if I ruined anything.
So that's really the premise of the book right there, encapsulating that we're human. And I think this is where we are failing one another, not leaning into one another. When you look at cops and you see an enemy, when you look at people who are different and you see an enemy, when you look at people with whom you disagree with, whether it be lifestyle, politics, whatever it may be, we leaning into one another and actually getting to know one another is what builds that bridge. It's hard to hate when you're up close. It's easy to hate far away. And so that's really the premise is, we're all just trying to move about the world. And as long as we're not harming one another, and I want to pause right there, because that harming one another, it goes for police as well. And I think you see in my book that I'm not a blind loyalist. I try to call balls and strikes. When cops are committing acts of excessive force, I call it as I see it. But when people are committing crimes, I call it as I see it. So to me, when you're not harming one another, that goes for everyone. It's called personal responsibility. And honestly, that's my religion right there.
And it's perfect religion for a police officer, I think. I used to talk about, and just so we're clear, you and I worked together, I guess, in the 90s. I was a prosecutor. You were with the Aurora Police Department. I think you described the time you were there as the darkest days, at least at the beginning when you started. Police work, I used to say, is you're either Andy Griffith or you're Barney Fife. And if we had more Andy Griffith, it would talk to people, talk them out of the situation, try and compromise with people, that kind of thing. Perhaps law enforcement would be easier and safer for everybody. You kind of apply that logic throughout the book as you grew as an officer and became a commander and things like that over time. So there is something to that philosophy, and so police work has changed over time, at least with respect to that philosophy.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but the idea that we're talking about now is that people see police as a general bad apple type thing. And why, tell us, why do you think that is? Is it because of cell phones and video, or how did we get to this place?
Well, it's interesting because I started my career in 1991. I started as a police cadet. And right when I started at the police department, the Rodney King incident had just happened. And that created protests and civil unrest all across the nation. I ended my career with George Floyd, and that caused protests and, unrest across the nation. So if you look at the two bookends of my career, you would make an assumption that nothing got better in policing. And I defy that because I watched it with my own eyes. You mentioned the 90s when we worked together. It was a bloodbath out there as far as crime. And I'm talking about in Aurora.
Yeah, you called it a war zone, right?
It was.
Yeah.
And so I'm talking about in Kane County specifically. But what I watched over the years was formal internal affairs, Office of Professional Standards. When I came on, the only discipline we got was an ash chewing by the lieutenant. You got called in and it was, hey kid, knock it off. And that was a citizen complaint, wasn't documented. There was no consistency, no continuity in discipline, accountability. There wasn't any. And it was also commonplace for a Rodney King event, to give somebody a what for is what I call it when they ran away. It was like, that's what my FTO taught me. It was like, somebody runs from you, they're going to get it. They get a pounding. Oh my gosh, that is not where we are today. And over the years, I've watched the evolution of policing. I've watched the formal accountability. Cell phones have played a part in it because that's we didn't have that technology prior to this. So I would say that's one of many layers, but I also know that that's not the best of us. What you're seeing in those videos is deplorable and there's no defense for it, but those are quite frankly an anomaly, and progressive police departments, progressive leaders have changed our profession into an actual profession over the years.
Yeah. And George Floyd affected Aurora, as you describe in the book, with Black Lives Matter protests, and there was some property destruction and everything else. As a police officer, understanding that what the officer did with George Floyd was wrong, criminal, and then seeing the reaction to it, how did you deal with that in the city of Aurora?
Well, first I pouted because I thought, this is not fair. This incident did not happen in my city. Our police are not harming anyone. And so I had this small moment where, and by the way, we were coming off of a mass shooting where 5 of my officers were shot running towards gunfire, saved so many people's lives. So we went from hero to zero. It was as if someone flipped a switch in our city. And I got pissed about it. And I said, this isn't fair. This isn't who we are. And yet we were painted with the same broad brush as Derek Chauvin, that we were the people who were putting the knees on people's necks and we weren't doing it. So it pissed me off. But then we had to respond. We had to react. And that was, that was the second worst day of my career, was watching my city get burned, squad cars on fire, cops getting bricks thrown at their heads, bricks that were pried from our own sidewalks downtown. And it was the hardest thing I have ever had to see. But we had to respond. I mean, we maintained order, and we did actually a remarkable job because they came for the outlet mall and we stood firm there, and they didn't breach the outlet mall, but then they infiltrated the downtown and we were just outmanned. And so, it was difficult. The whole thing was difficult.
It was something from a distance. It looked like something from the 60s. And I tell my kids, I tell the kids I teach, we're kind of living in a similar era in the 60s and 70s where we have marches in the streets and we have, things on fire and everything else. And it's a difficult time. One of the things that I found fascinating about your book was your life story and how you grew up and how you felt you were destined to be a police officer, right? You want to get into that?
Well, let's talk a bit about that and talk about the chapter called Pirate Ships and Slim Jims. We talked offline about your dad being a police officer, so was mine. You talked about wanting to be a cop in your youth. I did not, but and then you go on to describe some of the incidents, including spending a lot of time in the bar, the fact that Dad was an alcoholic. How did this weigh on your decision still to be dead set to become a police officer?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to mention that part of my book was not in my book. I retired and I rewrote what I had already written because I thought, I'm not telling the whole story. I need to be vulnerable. I need to tell people exactly who I am and how I got to be who I am. So I think that's just an important point, is that it's a vulnerability. And I threw caution to the wind and just thought, man, I have to talk about it. So my dad was 2 people to me, a hero, and a raging alcoholic. And the hero side of him was his work as a police officer. He was the kind of guy that ran towards things. And this is why I wanted to be a cop. He would I was in this family station wagon with the wooden panels, and he would say, don't move, stay here. He'd throw the car in park, and he would go and pull someone out of a vehicle that was, on fire. And it was an accident. And I remember sitting in the car looking out the window, and people were just whizzing by. And my dad was there pulling people out of a car. The second time it happened, this guy in front of us hit a toll booth, and he walked up there. Same drill. I knew the drill. Stay put. Don't move. He walked up to the toll booth. He starts fighting with this guy, trying to wrestle the keys from him. And this toll booth woman yells out, someone call the police. And there were no cell phones at that point. And I remember yelling back, my dad is the police. And it occurred to me, and this is when I decided I wanted to be a cop, is that it takes a special kind of person to be a first responder, because all the other cars whizzing by, why was it that my dad kept stopping while he was off duty? So I was thinking, God, when he was on duty, I can't even imagine the things that he was doing. So he instilled that in me. And since I was 10 years old, I wanted to be a cop. But when I talk about police accountability, it's also important to mention that, as I said, my dad was a cop by day, or depending on what shift, he was on rotating shifts at that time, and an alcoholic by night. And I can recall my dad not coming home at night, and my mom and I would find him on the front lawn of our house, at our home, because he was drinking all night long. I knew there were several hit and run accidents that he was involved in. No accountability. The cops just scooped him up, dropped him off in the front yard. And that's how you handled something like that. And I look back, that would never happen today. But I think it's important that that's why I am the way I am, is to know where I come from.
And our childhood does shape us. And I'm glad you made that point. Later in the book, we discovered that you're in the domestic violence unit in the Aurora Police Department. And you seem to imply that some of these haunting things that happened when you were a child flashed back.
They did. Yeah. And I hadn't really considered them. When I was in patrol, it was, we go to the scene and, just the facts, you can wrap everything up. You write a report, either make an arrest or, report it. And I didn't dwell on it as much until I got into the domestic violence unit, where I was a full-time detective for 5 years. And that's where I started getting to know the families and the players in, all of these domestic incidents. And substance abuse, as we all know, plays such a major factor. And my dad wasn't physically abusive at all, but, there's still so many other factors that go along, walking on eggshells and all of the things that, we tried to do to keep the peace. And that's what it started to come flooding back for me. But I didn't realize it. Sometimes you don't recall those memories until you're, exposed to it. And so it became very difficult to me. But the reason I left that unit is because instead of developing the empathy and compassion I should have, I was getting frustrated. And even though I was the one giving the training that says, listen, there are reasons that victims don't leave, finances, fear, religion, all of these things. And I was still getting upset because they were still going back to their abuser and putting their kids in harm's way. And it started to weigh on me, and it became overwhelming.
Now, later on in the book, in the chapter called Copy the Angels, you draw closure to all this. Your dad committed suicide.
He did. Yeah.
How'd that impact? I'm drawing a blank on whether or not that happened while you were already a police officer.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. Yeah. I was a commander. It wasn't too long ago. In fact, it was, this is the unfinished business I have with my father, is I had just interviewed for the chief's job. And I was a commander at the time, and he knew I was up for the chief's job, and he committed suicide before we even found out whether I got the job or not. And so but those were his demons. And it's taken me a long time to not be angry at him, because he didn't leave me a note. I'm an only child. And so we went there. It actually, my spouse went into his house, and because she wouldn't let me go in, and, I said, just go find the note. He obviously wrote a note to me, and he never did, and so I had to come to peace with, these are his demons. And, and these were his demons I'm sure he was also in the military, then he was a police officer, but he chose to turn to alcohol. And ultimately, that's really what I think led him to that decision that he made.
We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to talk to Chief Ziman about what she considers to be the worst day of her professional life. We'll be right back. Hello, friends. This is Ray Rogina. Break out your inner adventure with a trip to St. Charles, Illinois. Explore the vast culinary options with diverse and stellar restaurants that deliver on quality and service. Take the self-guided St. Charles Brewery Tour, where you'll find a new world of craft beer flavors and experiences awaiting you. Travel down natural walkways, trails, and even the Fox River on a riverboat or kayak. Make memories at all the fun places for activity, shopping, and recreation. It's time for an adventure. Visit stcalliance.org to start yours today.
At McNally Heating and Cooling, we understand that customer satisfaction starts with arriving at your home on time. Your service technician will apply the same attention to detail and quality workmanship to every job, large or small. We offer upfront, honest pricing, and we'll make sure the job gets done right from start to finish. From furnace and air conditioning service, minor repairs, or total equipment replacement, we do it all. Give us a call or find us online and let the luck of the Irish work for you.
We are back with Chief Kristen Ziman, and as I said when we went to break, I'm going to take you back to February 15, 2019, and simply ask you to describe for our audience the who's, the what's, the where's, the how's of the Henry Pratt shooting, which most of our listeners probably have a sense of.
Oh, for sure. So I was chief for 3 years at that time, just shy of 3 years, and I became chief in 2016. And one of the things that I think it's important to preface this with is the most important thing you can do in a police department is actually three things: training, training, training. And my SWAT commander and lieutenant walked into my office when I became chief, and they told me that if we had a serious incident in our city, we aren't ready. Our equipment is expired. We need more training. We have to have more active shooter training. And so I turned to my training division and said, let's do this. Let's get this done. We got all the equipment, and I was grateful to have a city council that provided that for us, the equipment. And so we got ready. We spent several years active shooter training, scenario-based training, de-escalation training, all of the things, preparing for the boogeyman, not knowing if the boogeyman would ever show up, but knowing that we would be prepared if that happened. And then on February 15th at 1:24 in the afternoon on a Friday, I was sitting in my office with a commander, and we were talking about very important police stuff. He was sharing with me a recipe for lemon caper sauce that he put on his fish. So very important police stuff.
Can we get a copy of that at the end of the show?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Commander Jack Fichtel, he's a foodie. And so that's what he was doing, showing me pictures of the food he made the night before and sharing the recipe. And another commander ran in and said, Chief, are you listening to the radio? And I wasn't. I had it on, but I wasn't. Neither of us were paying attention. And he said, there's an active shooter. I don't know how to describe that moment, because I think I looked at him and said, what did you just say? As if his words didn't compute for me. And then he said it again. And now I turned my radio up, and then we just started running, just tripping over each other. And we got in the car. And as I'm in the car, Commander Keith Cross is driving, who is now the chief, and myself and Commander Fichtel. And all I heard was, Officer Marco Gomez, I'm shot. We don't know where the shooter is. He's shooting. We're trying to locate him. And then I hear Officer Sobolski's shot. And I'm thinking, everything starts to play in slow motion. It only took us 3.5 minutes to get to the scene, but it felt like it took 2 hours. And then as I was having this moment of, this is not happening, this is not actually happening, then I don't know what it was, but it was like a switch flipped. And it was, all right, we're going in. What do we do? And my first thought when an incident happens is, who needs to know and what do we need to do? And I remember thinking, I got to let the mayor know, because this is big. So I grabbed my phone, first person, Alex Alexandru, the chief of staff, and he and the mayor were together, briefed them. I think I hung up on them. And then we started to go to the scene. because that's how we're trained, is to go into the gunfire. And then that moment snapped is, what is my role? What is my role? What is your role? And we got the command post set up, and then it became just an incident. And I had to think of it like an incident, because that's how we think. You can't bring emotion into it. I couldn't think about the officers that were shot. I couldn't think about anything else other than what needs to be done, what resources we've got to get this threat stopped, neutralize this threat. And that's really what was in my mind during the entire incident. And the 90 minutes, the shooter was killed. He actually opened fire on our officers, but it was a 90-minute search in a 300,000 foot warehouse. And he killed 5 people, shot another employee, and our officers showed up and one by one got shot. And the shooter turned towards the officers to ambush them. But they saved many lives that day, because there's video of many employees running out the side door while they were getting shot.
And you talk about the officers in the beginning of your book. I marked the pages 16 and 17, and specifically a couple of heroes that I think you allude to. Officer Zagar, for example. Perhaps you want to talk about maybe a couple of the acts that need to be spotlighted.
For sure. Well, I'll tell you what, they're all heroes, and the ones that got shot got the spotlight, and they are true heroes. But there were lots of people involved in that gun battle that day that didn't get shot. So every single person who showed up on that scene is a hero in my view. But Officer Zigar got shot in the throat, in the neck, and that guy had to be dragged away from the scene by Lieutenant Jeff Winsek. And interestingly enough, shot in the throat, missed anything vital. He was the first one released from the hospital. They put a little Snoopy Band-Aid on his, but he was shot through and through. And I went to his house and I said, because by that time I now witnessed the video, and I said, what the hell were you thinking? Why did you make that lieutenant pull you out of there? And he said to me, because I knew I got shot in the neck and I knew I was going to die. He said, I thought it's going to go black around the edges. He said, I wanted to go in, just send me in and let me take that guy out, and because I'm already going to die anyway. So let me at him. And I thought, mindset, like that is the mindset of a true warrior, and he is an absolute hero. By the way, that's also the second headshot that dude's had in his career. So I said, also, it's time for you to retire. Get out. You need to go home, spend time with your wife.
Leave the roulette wheel.
Yeah.
Right.
2 years later on your Facebook page, you wrote, Aurora is still healing. And you also said a broken heart continues to beat. Mm-hmm. How did this incident change you? How did it change Aurora? How did it change the Aurora Police Department?
So the incident that I just spoke about very operationally, right, is you go in, you neutralize the threat, and then the incident is over and everybody goes home and you collect the evidence and the scene is secured and the case is closed because, the threat has either been neutralized or arrested. And yet after that, the incident still goes on because those people, human beings wearing uniforms, are not robots. And they had to go back to work at 3 to 11 shift that same day, midnight shift that same night, first thing in the morning, having been involved in this incident. And they because the 911 calls don't stop, and the pain that those officers went through. And we did a great job of having, peer support groups. We had mental health professionals come in, but the pain continues. So even when the physical wounds healed, these officers were absolutely suffering from, just the PTSD from this situation. And then you add in the victims. I went to every one of the funerals of the victims, and met with their families. So the 5 people killed that day, and I saw pain like I have never seen before in my life. And so in that moment, I realized, first, tomorrow is promised to no one. And gun violence is stealing futures. And I'll never forget the faces, and especially of 21-year-old Trevor Wayner, who was the youngest one killed that day, who was a brand new intern at the Pratt manufacturing plant, first day on the job, and he was killed. And looking at his mother on that day just made me realize that we have to do something.
Well, let's hope that the memories of the individuals that were killed and, of course, the heroic actions of the Aurora Police Department and all the public servants that played a part that day continue to push the Aurora to a healing state as we move forward. I want to ask you one more question before I go to Pat. With respect to your chief position, I'd like you to take us through, perhaps just very quickly, your career ascent to the chief's job, and then perhaps put on top of that what you view to be your successes and failures, and what do you think your legacy is now that you're retired as the chief of the Aurora Police Department?
How long's this podcast for failures? Because we may need a part 2.
No. As a police chief, you know how to compress it.
I can write a concise report. So as I mentioned, started at 17 years old. So I have literally and figuratively grown up in the police department. And I was wide-eyed and like a little sponge, when I came on the job. And like I said, wanted to be a police officer my whole life. I will tell you, I never, ever wanted to move up to be promoted in the police department, not because I didn't want to, but because when I started in 91, there were no females in rank. So a department, almost 300 sworn, second largest city in the state of Illinois, and not any females.
Recall how many women police officers there were, period?
12%. 12% of about 300. So, but none in rank. Now, soon after, they did promote several females to sergeant rank, but that was the highest. So it just never occurred to me. And I think that's important to underscore, is that visibility matters. You don't know what you don't know. So it just never occurred to me that I would ever move up in the police department. And so then, when you ask the ascension, it was honestly wonderful male mentors that I have had in my life that looked at me and said, "Hey, you should take the sergeant's test." And I thought, oh my gosh, are you talking to me? It was Lieutenant Doug Needham and Lieutenant Larry Skaggs and, people like that said, no, you really should. And I listened to them and, and I thought, okay, I'll do it. And so I took the sergeant's test and got promoted. And that was after I was a detective and field training officer. And I was a sergeant for 5 years. And then this is where, never having had a female in the lieutenant's position, I thought, okay, wait, instead of, I have this tendency to make sure I check all the boxes. I have to go to school. I have to, get that degree. I have to get that special training. And so I thought, okay, I'll check all the boxes. And then I still had doubts about myself. I thought, why me? Why should I do that? And then something snapped in me and I thought, wait a minute, why not me? Why shouldn't I go for this? And I had a lot of tormentors. In the book, there's a chapter on mentors and tormentors. And the tormentors in my career have been alive and well, but they have taught me a lot as well. So fast forward to, I kind of defied a tormentor who told me I would never become a lieutenant in the history or in the Aurora Police Department. And so I used that criticism as fuel and studied for the lieutenant's test and scored number 1, became the first female lieutenant in the history of the PD, and then moved on to the commander position. And that is a credit that I give to Chief Greg Thomas, who was the first chief that I can think of in the history of our department that did not promote his friends. He promoted the best people for the job. He promoted people who thought differently, who looked differently. And that was a gift. And so I was a product of that, of him. Then the chief job came open. Greg Thomas said, I'm retiring. And that same thing, I'd now gotten pretty comfortable with, wait a minute, why not me? I'm doing it. I'm going for it. And I did. I applied for it. And the mayor at the time, Tom Weisner, said, you know what? I looked at your resume and he said, you left everybody in the rearview mirror. And I said, awesome. The failures in my career are many, but the failures that I can kind of encapsulate are when I made a decision too fast. When I had time, even though, I wanted to be decisive, where I didn't get buy-in, or, I made a decision because I'm sitting at a conference room table and, not remembering what it was like to be on the street, when I didn't use empathy where I should, where my ego got in the way. I mean, so many failures along the way, but the greatest success, and then I'll kind of wrap it up with legacy. I've loved every position in that police department, without a doubt. I've loved every single rank, but the best one for me was the chief, because I got to watch the officers do great work. And that's kind of bringing it full circle why I was so upset when George Floyd happened, because we were punished and our officers had done such a tremendous job of engaging the community, building trusting relationships. And I will leave my legacy to what an officer wrote me. It's one of the reasons I left the department. And when I did, is because I thought, all right, my work is done here. And he said, you gave us permission to be exactly who we are. You gave us permission to engage the community, to not, we were so focused prior to on counting things, how many arrests, how many felony arrests, misdemeanor arrests. And we weren't focusing on relationship building. We were checking boxes, and that's, community policing is a word salad unless you actually do it. And he said, during your tenure, we felt as though we could spend so much time building relationships. And he said, and that for me made me enjoy my job more, and that, if that's my legacy, I'll take it.
Patrick?
Yeah. We've talked a little bit about your life and your leadership. The other thing the book talks about is a new way forward in policing. Obviously, Illinois has a Police Reform Act, the Safety Act. We've got no cash bail coming up. Where do you stand on all these issues? And do you think that these statutes are going to affect police officers' ability to do the job and do it right?
Yeah, they already have affected them. And I think I mentioned earlier that I'm a big proponent of personal responsibility. And when you break the law, there needs to be accountability. And the problem that we are seeing right now, present day, is there are no consequences. And when you can shoot up stuff, and you can carjack people, and you get right out, even as simple as a retail theft, where there is statutorily a certain amount of retail theft where, it becomes a felony, and yet no one abides by that. They don't prosecute, they knock it down. And so that just emboldens offenders. And right now, we are in that place and time. And this is what we're seeing is the consequence. Crime is 30%, violent crime is 30% higher than it has been in 20 years. And it's a result of exactly that.
Bob Berlin was here earlier, and he talked about the idea that if you want to start solving crime, you have to prosecute and aggressively.
Yeah.
This idea of being progressive and giving everyone a second chance and pre-arrest diversion, that's affecting us in a negative way, and we need to move forward. What about the police reforms that the statute talks about? So
there were a number of police reforms in that bill. That bill was passed in the middle of the night, a 700-page bill. Mm-hmm. Riddle me this, and so that, to me, in my profession, we call that a clue, that there were things that were stuck in there. But here's the biggest issue I have is they didn't call law enforcement to the table to say, okay, if you take out the charge of obstructing, then how will you get how can you investigate a crime? If I see you, Pat, somebody describes you as, the guy that just stole someone's purse, and I stop you as a law enforcement officer, after someone says, he just stole my purse, here's his description, and I stop you and say, sir, you match that description. Can I talk to you for just a second? You've got some ID on you, and you tell me go scratch. There's nothing I can do. I can't stop you. And that's what the obstruction charge was used for. So we have to investigate. There were a number of things. You can't look at body cam footage before you write a report. Guys, I'm not a big sporty ball person. I know you are, because I can see your sports memorabilia here.
We're live at the studio.
Live in the studio, and I'm surrounded by a lot of sporty ball stuff. So I'm not a big sporty ball fan, but here's what I know about y'all who love sports is that when an umpire or a referee makes a call, how many cameras do they check? They say, hold on, time out. Let me check 7 cameras, make sure I get the call right. Let's play it slow-mo, backwards, forwards, and then you make the call. And that's sports. No offense, but that's not as serious as, life or death.
You're right.
And an officer who is not allowed to look at their body cam footage to write a report is preposterous. And to me, that is a gotcha game. They're trying to implicate an officer by saying, wait a minute, your report's different than the video. Well, of course it is. It's psychology when you're in the middle of an incident and you go by just recall.
Even in the old days before cameras, you were allowed to talk to other officers about, what did you see? What did you see? So, I think that consistently throughout the podcast, we have been questioning the Safety Act, and we're hoping that something happens with
I assume you think it should at least be put on pause with further review, to use a umpire's term.
Yeah. So some of those, the measures that they had brought forth in the original bill have been rectified because we came out swinging and said, here's the natural consequence. I understand you're wanting to target bad apples, right? But what you're doing is harming victims. If you're literally losing sight of those who are being victimized by those who commit crimes. And if those who commit crimes aren't not being held accountable and you are not giving police officers the tools that they need to do their jobs, you are just harming victims. You're re-victimizing them. And so I have a real problem with it. And so, you know what? Bring us to the table. As I mentioned, I'm a police reformer. I consider myself a police reformer. I also believe that you can support police and also want them to be better. I know, listeners, what a crazy concept. You don't have to pick a side. You can want your police to be better. We all want that, And so bring us to the table. Let's talk about it. There is a great cop does not want bad cops standing shoulder to shoulder with them. We all agree on that. Let's get them out.
Methinks that something will happen maybe after the election.
I hope so.
And before January, and some of these enactments go through. I wanted to just end up talking a little bit about life after retirement. I understand you applied for a few chief jobs in Chicago and Nashville, and those didn't go your way. I don't know necessarily if you're that upset about it, but you're now on the speaker's tour. You've written this book, Reimagining Blue, by Amplify Publishing, and then you just got appointed to something kind of exciting with the Uvalde shooting. Yeah. Tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, so since retiring, you're right. I put in for those big departments. I made it to the final 2 in each of them. So I consider myself the winner at losing. And Chicago, I wake up every day and, what is that song? Unanswered Prayers. Yes, I thank God for unanswered prayers. And since retiring, I had no plans to go around speaking. And I announced my retirement. I started getting all these invitations to speak about, crisis management, not just in law enforcement, but beyond law enforcement, changing the culture of an organization. So I'm blessed. People are inviting me to speak, and I will keep going until they stop inviting me.
Well, as a former educator, I always consider myself an educator. Is an education position in the possibility?
I don't think so.
Professor?
I don't think I'm tailored to that. I kind of like going in. I like going in and leaving. I like going in, and I think I'm making a greater impact going into different organizations. And so, but then to get to Uvalde, so the work that I have done since retiring, the work with international chiefs, on the Mass Violence Advisory Initiative, a part of that board. And so going around speaking about this very topic and others and women's empowerment led me to be invited by the Attorney General to investigate Uvalde. And we're just starting the work. We were just I literally got a call on a Saturday, and I was on a plane to DC on Tuesday morning, and they assembled nine of us, and we are going to be going into Uvalde, and we are going to be investigating the entire incident. And I know that seems a little counterintuitive since we're seeing all the other investigations kind of coming out and hearings, but this is a federal investigation, and the end in mind is to, number one, find the truth, because there are so many inconsistencies and so many voices. And so the truth always finds its way, and that is our job. And then at the end, the deliverable is, what can we do different as a community, as law enforcement, as a school district? What can we do going forward? Because it's not a matter of if, but a matter of when the next mass shooting is going to happen. And so that's the heavy work that we'll be doing over the next few months.
The book is Reimagining Blue by former Aurora Police Chief Kristen Ziman. Amplify Publishing, and as she tells us, it's available pre-order on Amazon, and it'll be available this summer. Can't thank you enough for joining us today and spending some time discussing police work, which, of course, to both of us, Pat is a former prosecutor, myself as a public official, and having a father as a police officer as well is near and dear to our hearts, and we thank you immensely.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
We'll take a small break, and we will return.
Prepare to be moved. We are the Fox Valley Auto Group. Both our Volkswagen and Buick GMC dealerships are located here in St. Charles, and we're proud to serve our community. As a recipient of the BBB Torch Award for Ethics, we are dedicated to ensuring quality first, always upholding uncompromised integrity, being customer-focused, and seeking continual improvement. Stop in today or visit our website at foxvalleyautogroup.com.
We're back, and a great discussion, I thought, Ray, with Kristen Ziman, former chief of police, Aurora, Illinois, and a wonderful book, Reimagining Blue, from Amplify Publishing, which is soon available on Amazon. A wonderful book, a detailed book about her life and her passion and her ideas for a new way forward in policing. What'd you think?
I'm going to tell you something. I thought she had all the high marks for what I wanted to hear about police work today. Coming from a police family and then engaging a number of different police chiefs over the course of time, specifically the one in St. Charles, Jim Keegan, who I've come to know and appreciate, and listening to her talk and saying, police aren't perfect. Police have flaws here and there, but at the end of the day, they're one of the more crucial services that are provided by the public, by government, if I may. And we always want to be in a position not to take them down, but instead to try to bolster the profession and make it as efficient and worthy as possible. And I just appreciate all that, and I'm hoping she'll be able to make some significant contributions to the Evaldi Commission, because it sounds to me like there needs to be some work done there, and then moving forward into the bigger picture. The thing that, of course, she said at the end that scares all of us to death is it's not a matter of whether there's going to be another shooting, but when it's going to happen. And that, of course, is, again, to me, the stigma in our whole society.
Well, as you and I both know, there's no doubt about that. Until we deal with guns and all the other, I'll call tangential issues related thereto, we're going to have these shootings, and they're going to go on and on and on. The legislation is pending in the Senate. I think it was passed, but that's not going to change anything, really. At the end of the day, we have a lot of work to do, and the first thing that we have to do is train. And training the police, I think this is viable. We need to train suspects on what to do when they get pulled over and how to deal with the police, for the love of Mike. And maybe we can do that in driver's ed classes or something. But I just think that everybody's a little on edge out there on the street. Training goes a long way. Everybody has to just calm down and deal with problems in a sophisticated, mature way. Andy Griffith, that metaphor, I think, is correct. You can talk your way through problems, and this is an important book. It talks about that very thing. It talks about new ways of policing. It talks about police reform and efforts at that. Aurora has been through a lot. I was there in the 90s. I was there in the war zone, as she called it. It's changed a lot, and I would hate to see it go backwards. We have to worry a little bit about these progressive reforms, and we also have to work to try and undo some of this legislation that we talked about through Safety Act.
Her book title is relevant, Reimaging Blue. It's a profession in the midst of change, in the midst of adjustment, etc. But it's, in my mind at least, always one of the more crucial professions. And with that, Pat, I think it's time for us to say so long until the next podcast. And so on behalf of Pat Crimmins, Ray Rogina saying, we hope you enjoy this podcast and you're listening to all of our podcasts. And remember, we do talk everything here at Just a Couple of Guys. So until next time, remember, stay cool, be safe. So long, everyone.